Thank you so much for tuning in to our second act with Paige and Silka today. We are not on a regular schedule. We're coming to you because of the recent events in Las Vegas, the shooting. As most of you know, Paige is a traumatic stress and integrative healing consultant who fortunately or unfortunately has lots of experience with these kinds of topics and dealing with the people who are affected by this trauma, including the first responders. Paige, when you saw this happen, I know you called me and we were already somewhat appalled by the news coverage. What is it that you want to bring to our audience today that doesn't get covered in these situations?
Well, first of all, here we are once again hearing another devastating story and situation that keeps happening over and over and over again in the United States. What doesn't get covered is the level of the emotional trauma that occurs with everybody that's physically involved. So the first responders, all of the victims, anyone who was nearby at Mandalay Bay during that concert, but also the people who were not there. We call this vicarious traumatization. So if you think about it, for people who are in our age group who remember 9/11 very well, they played the tape over and over and over again of the planes crashing in, and there was research done as to how that affected people psychologically and emotionally. And it's traumatic, and it actually causes trauma in the body. So fast forward 17 some years later, and here we are having, how many mass shootings do we see per year now, or traumatic events or terrorist events? And it's bothersome to me that the media will come on, and of course they're going to cover it, but they put microphones and cameras in front of these victims' faces and want them to speak. And guess what? These victims are so much in shock. They don't know what they're saying. They don't know what just happened to them or what they experienced. And I've had, many victims in the past say to me, I wish I never would have spoken to that camera person. I didn't know what I was saying, or I regret saying whatever. And that becomes part of their story of their trauma. So we have people who are there who were emotionally traumatized. And I mean emotionally, mentally, physically, medically, energetically, spiritually, all traumatized. And then you have their loved ones who are traumatized by it. And then you have the friends of their loved ones who also become traumatized by it. So we're becoming a nation where every day there's something violent that's being reported over and over and over again. And our bodies, our sensory system in our bodies picks up every single piece of information, and it lies in the crevices of our whole body, which is traumatic. And no one talks about what toll that has on an individual, on a group, on a community, on a nation, and globally.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to bring this up today, because I'm behind the scenes in the trenches for decades, along with everybody else who does what I do, and the first responders knowing this is what's going on, and the victims knowing what's going on. But nobody follows them to say, my gosh, how has that affected your life, your perception of life, your faith base, your spirituality, your relationships, your medical conditions? We just move on to the next violent act and forget about everything that's happened with the other violent acts.
Yeah. Well, and didn't you say that today in some of your sessions you had some first responders that encouraged you to come out and speak on this?
Yeah, I spoke with them today because, Silka, the other day I was so passionate about this. And when I was speaking with my first responders, they were like, yes, Paige, no one talks about this. And these are first responders who, they run in. They're the ones who help us, who have to have the bravado. But behind closed doors, everything that they've experienced and the layers upon layers. So you have the first responders, the medical staff, the victims. I mean, everybody who's involved is having emotional, mental, physical, medical, spiritual trauma that is not being addressed, whether it's in the media or the healthcare system, or how we train, medical professionals on how to help people from an emotional standpoint. I mean, it's just a chain reaction, and it's a vicious cycle, and no one's talking about those components.
So what do you tell our viewers who are parents, who are grandparents, who are watching this with children? How do you make sense of this?
Well, that's what's hard, is like, how do you make sense of things that are absolutely and explicitly senseless? That's why for me, I always go to the spiritual realm or the faith-based realm. But there is the realm of we live in fear. We're constantly, being pushed the the feelings or the emotions of fear and violence with everything that goes on in the world. And you know me well enough now, Silka, to know that there has to be discussions. You have to ask whether it's your grandkids or if they're old enough, or, or or adults or people affected or in some way, what's going on with you? What are you feeling? How do you feel about what just happened? Because we don't know. We don't know enough about the background, first of all, of the shooter. And we don't know how much mental health history is in the background of the shooter. But I know the more that you talk about it and you kind of get out what it's like for you, or if you notice someone, whether it's a child, a teenager, a young adult, or an adult who seems to be having a direct response by it, don't ignore it. Don't put it under the rug. Say to them, you know what, I think it might be a good idea if we reach out to someone who could help process this with you, sort things out, or if someone's having, physical symptomatology as well. But to just talk about the trauma, the perpetrator, show the clips over and over again is too much for any human being to take. Now, I do applaud the media for showing the light of how people help to jump in who they don't even have to know the person, because like I've always said to you, Silka, we're all connected on a soul level. We're there to help each other, and that is wonderful. But let's not leave it at that. Let's look at further. What do we do moving forward with all these people in our country that have been traumatized over and over again by mass shootings, terrorist attacks, whatever it might be? Because that's where we leave it. We don't go any further than that.
Paige, for those people who are having trouble dealing with this, any words of advice how to process this?
Yeah, it's really hard to always wrap your head, your soul, your spirit around how someone could purposely take others' lives. So, remember that, like I said earlier, talk about it, get it out, better out than in. Strive for some balance, balance in your life. If you're going to continually watch the news and become re-traumatized, take a break from it. I'm a big proponent of nature. Get out in nature. Nature is healing, whether you sit outside, whether you take a walk, whatever it might be. If you're noticing that yourself or your grandkids or your kids are starting to ask questions about death a lot, or fear, or having nightmares, watch to see how long that goes on. Because, it's very typical to have these types of reactions first couple of days or a week after. But if it starts to go on and on, that's when you need to reach out to someone like me, or someone in the field who works with traumatic stress, potentially PTSD. So it's really not just taking these events and brushing them underneath the carpet. It's talking about them, being aware of how the people around you are being affected, whether it's your loved ones, your colleagues, your friends. Pay attention to what they're saying and don't veer away from something that's uncomfortable. Let's get it out. Let's discuss it, because it's a hard thing for us to wrap ourselves around what's going on in this world.
Well, a lot to think about, Paige. Thank you. And obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with everybody who's affected by this in Vegas. And we hope to see you again soon on another episode of Our Second Act with Paige and Silka. Bye bye.